Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse, and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. And I hope you're having a wonderful day. As you will know, if you regularly follow Midday with Reverend Don, you can type your questions or comments into whatever platform you're watching on, and they should show up here in my chat room. And I look forward to talking to you each day. Yesterday, we talked about Odin's Eye, the temporary second moon that we are to have between September 29th and November 25th. This is a comet which will be momentarily, for that roughly 2 month period, orbiting the Earth. And then it's said that it will break free and return to a heliocentric or around the sun orbit. This is a very interesting thing. Hello to Antonio in the chat room. It's good to see you, Antonio. I certainly never expected to see a time that we would have a second moon during my life. Now, I've seen the idea of a second moon in science fiction a few times, but the idea that it's actually something happening is pretty remarkable. And I think that for we as metaphysical people, we need to be very mindful of just how remarkable this event is, and certainly not take it for granted. Now, one of the questions, and I was talking about this in my chat room last night that I do on Patreon. And if you're interested in my Patreon, you can find it at revdonlewis.com. But we were talking about it, and the question came up of whether this has ever happened before. And hello to Renee in the chat room. It's good to see you, Renee. And what we decided was that it certainly must have at some point during the history of the Earth, which is very old, but not during human history as far as anyone knows. Now, I understand that the second moon is not really going to be visible with the naked eye, or even with some telescopes. So even if it had happened during human history, who would know? So it may be a more common thing than we realize, and we're only just now able to see it. But either way, it's certainly not so common that we're likely to see another, certainly in my lifetime, and I imagine in most people's. So it's a very remarkable moment. It's a very magical moment. For most of us who consider ourselves pagans and Wiccans, the moon is very important to our metaphysical concepts and understandings and to our practices. The presence of a second one, obviously, therefore, must have some very important spiritual meanings. And hello to Janet Winston in the chat room. It's good to see you, Janet. And that's one of the things that I spoke about a little bit yesterday. I'm going to speak about a little bit today, and I'm sure I'll speak about it through the entire period when we're dealing with this subject. I do not see any way from my religious background not to regard this as an extraordinary and sacred occurrence. Now, I've seen an astrologer. Most astrologers don't seem to have said anything about this at all. And in fact, if anything, to be totally taken by surprise by it, which I think most people are. But the astrologer who I did see commented on it merely treated it as an ordinary asteroid. I do not see it that way at all. But then I'm not looking at it only as an astrologer, but also as a Corellian archpriest. To me, this is a magnification of the lunar energies, a doubling of them, for want of a better word. And hello to Mary Hawk in the chat room. It's good to see you, Mary. It has, I think, very deep spiritual ramifications that we must pay attention to. And what are those ramifications? What is the meaning of this Odin's Eye second moon? And as I was saying yesterday, I think it's very much connected to, and hello to Bonnie in the chat room, issues of prophecy, issues of oracle work, issues of psychism, and also inner issues coming forward, hidden issues coming into vision. A time of revelation, both in the spiritual sense of prophecies and in the more personal sense of shadow work, and in the more worldly sense of motivations and events that have been secret becoming known. I think it's going to be a very remarkable time. The fact that it happens to coincide with our American election, I think, is extremely significant. The fact that it follows the festival of Mabon so quickly, which to me is always about justice and the reaping of your harvest. The fact that um, and hello to Deb Koger McGinley in the chat room. It's good to see you, Deb. These are all very important aspects of this to me, and they all kind of suggest to me it's going to be a very interesting period. A lot of things are going to come to the surface. Who knows what's going to happen with them? I mean, we can read for it, we can do magic for it, but at this point, it's all still in the future and could take many shapes. But one aspect of that shape seems to me the revelation of knowledge otherwise unavailable. And considering some of the things going on in the world, not only in the US, but other parts of the world, it seems to me there's a lot that can be revealed. And if we look to mythology, what was the characteristic of Odin's eye? That it could see things from vast distances away. This is why when Odin wanted a drink from the well of Urd, which would provide cosmic wisdom, the guardian of the well, Mimir, asked for one of his eyes. It was one of the few things that was of somewhat equal value to cosmic wisdom. It sees all. And I think that both for us personally and globally, that's going to be the energy of this period. And for us personally, that means we need to be willing to have an honest look at ourselves and our lives, which, is not one of the easiest things to do because we so often have illusions that are dear to us. And we don't always see reality very clearly, particularly the reality of who we are. And I think this will be a time when that is going to be highly emphasized for many people. Now, as I was saying yesterday, how this affects an individual depends on where in their chart the Odin's eye happens to be, as well as its presence in general. And we're going to have to get a map of that as we go forward, because this is not an ordinary astrological body. It's not in the ephemerae and so forth. It's a very unusual occurrence. And when you look at fantasy works, when you look at horror works, sometimes when you look at mythological works, the idea of this really unique period in time where magical things are possible that might not be otherwise is often a trope that is relied on, waiting for just that right astrological alignment, for example. But to be honest, I'm very hard pressed to think of any more magical moment than the brief period of Earth having two moons. Who would have ever imagined that? I saw a meme earlier today. It's a common meme. It's the guy in front of the bingo board saying, "Okay, whose card had Earth getting a second moon in September?" But honestly, who was expecting that? A few astronomers, maybe, and not for terribly long, as far as I can tell, because the first remarks on this are only a few months old. It has come upon us very suddenly. And as magical people, I think we need to be very mindful of the magical character of the event. Now, going back to the astrologer who I saw, who basically dismissed it as just another comet, um, being an astrologer is not quite the same thing as practicing magic. And as an astrologer, that may be a perfectly good way to look at it. As a magician, that is not the way to look at this situation. It's a very unique and special situation. And during the period of the two moons, I am sure that we will have a number of meditations and rituals attuning to it and using this energy. So be ready for those. They will be coming. Um, we actually unintentionally have one right at the very beginning because it so happens that the prediction is for this second moon to enter Earth's orbit on the occasion of a regional Corellian lustration here in Vermilion County, homeland of the Corellian tradition. Um, and what is the centerpiece of lustration? The Oracle of the Ancestors. Um, and with the significance of the Odin's Eye being around oracles and prophecy, and that occurring unintentionally, I find it breathtaking, to be honest. It's not something I was expecting. I can't imagine anyone would, because if someone said to you, Earth is going to have a second moon for 2 months, you would not have taken them particularly seriously unless they came with a lot of evidence. You would have said, "Oh, that's a conspiracy theory. That's science fiction." As I say, I've seen this theme in science fiction works, but I was not expecting it in real life. Um, in terms of things that are unexpected, it's right up there with dinosaur mummies, of which there have been a few. Um, but who would have thought that such a thing could be, and yet it has been. So for me, this is something that's very much getting my attention. And I hope it will get your attention too, and I hope that you'll use it in a magical way to gain greater insight into your life and into the world. And hello to Corellian TV in the chat room. Um, and since Mary is here as Mary, I'm not quite sure who Corellian TV is, but there are several people it could be. All of you, welcome. Um, but this is, people use the term once in a lifetime frequently, but I think we can confidently say this is a once in a lifetime thing. In the last few years, it seems to me that every little astrological alignment has been described as a once in a millennium event, and they're not. Some of them are in fact rare, but and Corellian TV is Jason. Hello, Jason. Um, but astrological alignments recur on a regular mathematical basis. This, though there may very well be a mathematical pattern behind it, was not expected, and again, surely is not going to occur again in our lifetime. Even if it is not as unique an appearance as it may seem, it surely is not a common one, or this would not be the first one we're noticing. Because we've had this level of technology to be aware of something like this for quite some time now. And this is the first occurrence. Now, again, you're not going to be able to look out your window and see the second moon. However, there are telescopes that will be able to show it, and I'm sure that there will be lots of footage available. And this is also, in my opinion, part of the significance, part of the interpretation of this event, the fact that it's not readily visible, but is there. And what is prophecy? What is oracular work? What to some extent is magic? Things that are not readily visible, but very much there. And so I find the Odin's Eye very tied into all of these things. Now, Bonnie says, and hello to Bonnie in the chat room, there's a deep reason as to why now. And yes, and I have to point out that in the last few years, there have been several different things which have had to do with that idea of greater self understanding, of hidden things coming forward, of planetary shadow work. And surely the presence of the Odin's Eye with these meanings attached to it is planetary shadow work. May very well for many of us be individual shadow work as well. I expect that will be the case, but it's also planetary shadow work that societies will be going through, that the world will be going through, because there's one moon for the whole world, or for 2 months, two moons for the whole world. I was asked the other day what the dates will be for this in Europe, and the truth is it's the same, because unlike certain things which are measured from where you are on the planet and as you're looking at them, this is about when this comet begins its orbit of the Earth. Um, and that's a fixed date no matter where you are. So I would say no matter what country you're in, no matter what culture you belong to, expect to find out things that have not otherwise been seen, expect to be doing some shadow work, expect at the end of it to have a clearer idea of who you are. And is this, and I said this yesterday, is this a blessing or a curse? And that's entirely up to us. Um, and that's so often the case. One of the things I've often remarked upon is that for most people, their greatest strength and their greatest weakness are the same thing. The greatest blessing and the greatest curse can be the same thing too. If we use this, if we benefit from it, if we learn from it, it is a blessing. If we hide from it, if we ignore it, it will be a curse, because this work must still be done. And it's like a Saturn return. If you're not familiar with the Saturn return, when Saturn returns to its place in a person's natal chart, it moves them from wherever they happen to be to where they need to be, whether they wish to go or not. And this can be either incredibly liberating and incredibly positive, or it can be very traumatic and incredibly negative, depending on how close they are to where they should be and how accepting they are of the change. I would say this is true of karma also. Karma is our great benefactor, yet people often speak of it in a negative fashion because they resist it. And when you resist things like this, they still happen, but it takes more extreme methods to make it happen. And my wish for all of us is, as we greet the Odin's Eye, that we embrace it and attune to it and do not try to hide from it. And Bonnie in the chat room says this is worldwide, and yes, I believe it will be. Absolutely worldwide. And of course, we'll be most aware of the effects on wherever we happen to live. And I say this knowing that my audience is multinational, global even. I mean, we often have people give us greetings from Europe or India or South America or Australia when we're doing this show. And obviously, the local effects are the first thing people will notice, but it's not going to be, I don't think, a purely local event. And, I would say that to some extent, and this also makes sense as what we might call the umbra of the experience, we've been having lots of things come to sight in recent months. motivations, behaviors that might not otherwise have been obvious. But I think we're going to see an intensification of that. And for some of us, that's going to be very chaotic. For others, it will be intensely helpful. And again, I think it comes down to us, what we make of it. And this is true for magic and psychism in general. And in the first degree lessons, I say bluntly that the student will get out of it basically what they put into it. The more that you work with it, the more you work to master it, the better off you're going to be. And if you don't do these things, well, you're not going to get the same benefit. Now, Mary says, do you think this has to do with the coming of the age of Aquarius? Yes, I do. And I will remind people that, I'm a follower of the Correllian system, which says that the age of Aquarius is currently in its 24th year. But the changes are certainly ongoing. It's not like flicking a switch, it's a process. I think this is part of the dissolving of the qualities of the age of Pisces and making room for the qualities of the age of Aquarius. And I think a lot of things that we see happening are following that route. And it's going to be a long route. It's not overnight. It's not, again, like flicking a switch. But yes, I believe this is very much part of the new age of Aquarius clearing out aspects of the age of Pisces that are still hanging on. And how exactly will that manifest will depend on people. But one of the things that we see very clearly, and one of the things that heralded the coming of the age of Aquarius was the generation gap of the 60s for many people. But we're currently in a place where we have a clash between generations. And we're literally looking at the older fighting with the younger. So I think that's highly symbolic of that change from Pisces to Aquarius. And hello to Nicholas in the chat room. It's good to see you, Nicholas. With that, I see that we're well past our midpoint. I want to take a moment for a message from our sponsor, Equinox Learning Hub. And here we go. And thank you to Equinox Learning Hub. And our other sponsor is Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions. And let us hear a word from, me.
Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Reverend Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Reverend Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours.
And thank you to Reverend Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions. And we'll be announcing the next auction presently. So with that, we're down to our last 5 minutes, but I want to kind of summarize what I've been saying, that the coming of the Odin's eye is about vision. In mythology, the eye itself could see things miles away, which is what made it special. The well of Mimir, the well of Urd, offered cosmic wisdom, understanding. When we put these ideas together, And it is very much about seeing what is unseen. And again, I feel a lot of that's going to be around prophecy. And I think that if one is a baby born during this 2 month period, between September 29th and November 25th, I would look for heightened psychic awareness. I would look for um, oracular abilities in that entire population. I also, again, look for that during this period. And I think that we may be seeing things that are of an oracular nature, even in the everyday world where nobody thinks in those terms. So let us be watching. I'm also curious to know what technological announcements may come during this period, and I'm relatively certain that something will. And I'm curious to see what it will be. It's going to be, no matter what it manifests as, an interesting period. And I think that for us to take it as anything less than a particularly sacred time, a time we will not see again in our lifetimes, is remarkably non-magical. And for those of us who are magical, we must be mindful of this. We must be aware that that we are looking at something very special. So expect me to speak more about this, but I'm also going to be speaking about leadership. I'm also going to be speaking about metaphysics. I'm also going to be speaking about those political issues that we still face. And, one of the things that we still face is that good old Project 2025. I believe that it's experienced several name changes. Um, and although it has importance to upcoming elections, it's not really tied to them. It's a long-term plan that has the backing of a number of politicians, not all of whom are public about backing it. And it represents a particularly regressive strain of humanity, otherwise known as Christian dominionists, Christian nationalists. And they've made clear what their desired future is. And if we do not pay attention to that, we have no one to blame but ourselves. If we allow ourselves to think that one election is going to make any difference to that, we have no one to blame for ourselves when that is not the case. It's a fight we're going to be fighting for a while. To actually set it back significantly will take something very, very powerful, because so much of it is already prepared. I can't say that often enough, that the current state of the court system in the United States is probably more important to the implementation of the ideas put forward in Project 2025 than the elections for the legislative branch of our government, and also harder to undo. So this is something we must not forget or relax about or be distracted from. And there are all kinds of things, it seems to me, trying to distract us from this. But the Odin's Eye, being about the revelation of what is hidden, what is not obvious, I think will reveal many more things as we go through this period. And I'm looking forward to sharing this period with you. And hello to Corey Judy in the chat room. It's good to see you. And with that, we've come to the end of our half hour. I'll be back tomorrow with Chris Copeland. We'll be talking about the latest from Corellian Publishing. And I hope you have a lovely day. And with that, let us close with our prayer, as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives. And we rejoice in this walk we walk together. And we ask you to help us to embrace self-knowledge, to embrace the revelation of truth, to be willing to see ourselves and our world clearly, and to make the most positive use of that sight. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you With great love and thanks, and knowing you are always with us, from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always.